The late autumn rain hammered against the cracked windows of the abandoned villa in Staten Island, each drop sounding like a gunshot in the silence. Domenico Russo sat in the darkness, his expensive suit now torn and stained with blood that had long since dried to a rust-colored brown. 3 weeks ago, this man had commanded an empire. The Russo crime family had controlled the waterfront in New York City for 4 generations, from the docks of Red Hook to the restaurants of Little Italy, from the construction contracts in Manhattan to the waste management routes across New Jersey. The Russo name meant power, respect, and fear. Domenico had inherited the title of Don at 35 years old when his father, Giovanni Russo, died of a heart attack during a FBI raid. For 15 years, Domenico had expanded the family business, navigated wars with rival families, and built a fortune estimated at over $200 million. But empires built on blood have a way of drowning in it. His nephew, Marco, had been planning the betrayal for 2 years. Domenico had trusted him completely, had groomed him to eventually take over the family. Marco was his sister's son, family by blood, loyal by tradition, or so Domenico had believed. The night of the betrayal replayed in Domenico's mind like a horror film. He couldn't stop watching. They had been meeting at the old warehouse in Red Hook to discuss a major heroin shipment coming in from Sicily. Domenico had walked in, expecting his usual crew of 20 loyal soldiers. Instead, he found Marco standing with the Calabresi family, the rivals who had been trying to take over Russo territory for a decade. "Nothing personal, Uncle," Marco had said, his gun already drawn. "But you're old school. You still believe in honor, in the code, in all that Sicilian tradition." "Bullshit, the world has changed, business is business." Domenico had survived only because his driver, old Paulie, had sensed something wrong and pulled the fire alarm in the building. In the chaos of the sprinklers and the alarms, Domenico had escaped through a service tunnel that only the oldest members of the family knew about, but he'd lost everything else. Marco had moved quickly. Within 48 hours, he'd convinced the other capos that Domenico had been skimming money, that he'd been planning to testify against the family in exchange for witness protection. The lies were so perfectly constructed that even Domenico's most loyal soldiers believed them. They froze his bank accounts, seized his properties, and put a contract out on his life, $5 million to whoever brought them Domenico Russo's head. Now he was hiding in this abandoned villa that had once belonged to his grandmother, a property so old that it didn't appear in any family records Marco would have access to. The roof leaked, the plumbing didn't work, and rats scurried through the walls at night. Domenico Russo, who used to eat at the finest restaurants in Manhattan, was now surviving on canned food stolen from a corner store. The Don who once wore custom suits from Milan, now dressed in clothes he'd found in a Salvation Army donation bin. He'd been shot. Twice during his escape, the wounds had gotten infected. Fever came and went in waves. He knew he was dying slowly in this forgotten place, and part of him thought maybe that was justice. Maybe this was what he deserved after a lifetime of violence. It was on his 23rd day in the villa, delirious with fever and half convinced he was already dead. When he heard the front door open, Domenico reached for the gun he kept under the rotting couch. Cushion, his hand shaking so badly he could barely grip it. If Marco's men had found him, he'd at least take some of them with him before he went. But the footsteps that echoed through the empty house were light, cautious, not the heavy boots of hitmen. A woman appeared in the doorway of the room where Domenico lay. She was black, probably in her late 30s, wearing scrubs like she'd just come from a hospital shift. Her hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and she carried cleaning supplies in a plastic caddy. She froze when she saw him, her eyes going wide. For a long moment, they just stared at each other. Domenico knew he must look terrifying, a skeletal figure in the shadows with a gun in his hand and blood on his clothes. "Please," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Don't scream, I won't hurt you." The woman didn't scream. She didn't run. Instead, she set down her cleaning supplies and took a careful step closer. "You're sick," she said, her voice calm and clinical. "Those wounds are badly infected. When's the last time you ate something that wasn't out of a can?" Domenico tried to answer, but found he couldn't remember. Time had become fluid in this place. "I'm going to help you," the woman said. "But first you need to put that gun down. I'm a nurse. I'm not going to hurt you, and I'm not going to call the police." "Why?" Domenico managed to ask. "Why would you help me?" She met his eyes with a steady gaze that reminded him of his grandmother, the woman who'd raised him to be strong, but also to be human. "Because you're dying," she said simply, "and I took an oath now. Put the gun down before you pass out and shoot yourself by accident." Domenico let the gun fall from his hand. He didn't have the strength to hold it anymore anyway. The woman moved quickly after that, pulling medical supplies from a bag Domenico hadn't noticed she was carrying. She cleaned his wounds with a gentleness that seemed impossible given the situation. She gave him antibiotics, fever reducers, and made him drink water. even though every swallow felt like glass going down his throat. "What's your name?" she asked as she worked. "Nico," he said, using the shortened version his grandmother had called him. His real name was too dangerous now. "I'm Diane," she said. "Diane Crawford. And before you ask, I'm not going to ask why you're hiding in an abandoned house with gunshot wounds. I'm not going to ask who you're running from or what you did. All I'm going to do is try to keep you alive." "Why?" he asked again. Diane was quiet for a moment, wrapping clean bandages around his shoulder where one of the bullets had torn through. "About 5 years ago," she said finally, "I was homeless, living in my car with my daughter, working 3 part-time jobs trying to finish nursing school. One winter night, my daughter got sick, really sick. I took her to the emergency room, but I didn't have insurance. They were going to turn us away." She paused, her hands steady as she worked. "A doctor saw us in the parking lot. She paid for everything out of her own pocket. She didn't ask questions, didn't judge me, didn't lecture me about my choices. She just helped." She told me, "Someday when you can help someone else who needs it, that's how we survive in this world. We take care of each other." Diane finished the bandaging and looked at Domenico with those steady, compassionate eyes. "So that's what I'm doing, taking care of someone who needs it." Over the next 3 weeks, Diane came to the villa every other day. She brought food, fresh bandages, medicine. She never asked questions about his past, never pushed for information he wasn't willing to give. Slowly, impossibly, Domenico began to heal. As his fever broke and his strength returned, he started to notice details about Diane he'd missed in his delirium, the way she hummed old gospel songs while she cleaned, the worn Bible she kept in her bag, the picture of a young girl, maybe 13 or 14, that she kept in her wallet. "Your daughter?" he asked one day, gesturing to the photo. Diane's face softened. "Yeah, that's my Maya. She's 16 now, smart as a whip, wants to be a lawyer. You must be proud." Every single day, Diane packed up her supplies, getting ready to leave for her shift at the hospital. "She's the reason I survived those hard years, the reason I kept going when I wanted to give up." After she left, Domenico found himself thinking about family, about legacy, about what we leave behind. He'd spent 15 years building power, accumulating wealth, commanding respect through fear, but he had no children, no real family left except the nephew who'd betrayed him. What was it all for? He'd given his entire life to the Cosa Nostra, to the code, to the tradition, and in the end, it meant nothing. His own blood had sold him out for power and money, but this stranger, this woman who owed him nothing, was saving his life simply because it was the right thing to do. It was a month after. Diane first found him when Domenico was finally strong enough to stand without dizziness, to move around the villa, without his wounds screaming in protest. He'd been thinking about his next move, about how to survive in a city where every corner could hide an assassin with his photo. Diane arrived for her usual visit, but something was different. Her hands were shaking as she unpacked her supplies, and there were dark circles under her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights. "What's wrong?" Domenico asked. "Nothing," she said too quickly. "I'm fine." But Domenico hadn't survived 30 years in the mafia by being unable to read people. "Diane, what happened?" She sat down heavily on the old couch, suddenly looking exhausted. "It's my daughter Maya. She got involved with the wrong crowd at school. Some gang called the Vipers. They've been recruiting kids in her neighborhood." Domenico felt his blood run. Cold, he knew the Vipers. They were a brutal street gang that had been expanding their territory in Brooklyn, dealing drugs to kids, running protection rackets on small businesses. 3 days ago, Diane continued, her voice breaking, she tried to get out. She told them she didn't want to be part of it anymore. They said she knows too much, that she can't just leave. They threatened her, Nico. They told her if she talks to the police or tries to run, they'll kill both of us. Tears were streaming down Diane's face now. "I've been saving for 2 years to move us out of that neighborhood. I'm so close, just 2 more months, and I'd have enough for first and last month's rent in a better area. But now," she looked at Domenico with desperate eyes, "I don't know what to do. I can't go to the police because if the Vipers find out, they'll kill her. I can't afford to move right now. I'm trapped, and my baby is in danger because of my choices, because I couldn't give her a better life sooner." Domenico felt something shift inside him. For the first time in months, he felt clear purpose. This woman had saved his life when she had every reason to walk away. She'd shown him kindness in his darkest hour, and now she needed help. "Give me their names," he said quietly. Diane looked up, confused. "What? The Vipers? The ones threatening your daughter? Give me their names? Nico, what are you going to do?" Domenico stood up, testing his fully healed body. The wounds had left scars, but the weakness was gone. He was ready. "I'm going to remind some people that there are still consequences in this world, that you can't threaten children without answering for it. I don't want you to get hurt because of me. Diane," he knelt in front of her, taking her hands in his. "You saved my life. Let me repay that debt." Let me protect your daughter the way you protected me. If this story is keeping you on the edge of your seat, I'd really appreciate it if you could hit that like button. It helps these stories reach more people who might need to hear them. And trust me, what happens next is going to blow your mind. 2 days later, Domenico stood outside a warehouse in East New York, Brooklyn. This was Viper's territory, and he was walking in unarmed and alone. The teenage boys guarding the entrance looked at him like he was crazy. A middle-aged Italian man in a worn jacket, walking into gang territory like he owned the place. "You lost, old man?" one of them sneered. "I'm here to see your boss. Tell him someone wants to make a deal about Maya Crawford." At the mention of Maya's name, the guards tensed. One of them pulled out a phone and made a quick call. 5 minutes later, Domenico was being escorted into the warehouse. The leader of the Vipers was a man in his 30s named Deshaun Williams. He sat behind a desk that looked ridiculous in the warehouse setting, clearly trying to play at being a businessman. "You got a lot of nerve walking in here," Deshaun said. "You know who I am?" "Yes," Domenico said calmly. "And you have no idea who I am, but you're about to find out." He pulled out a piece of paper and slid it across the desk. On it were names, addresses and numbers, bank accounts, safe house locations, distribution networks. Deshaun's eyes widened as he read. "How did you—" "I know everything about your operation," Domenico said. "I know about the heroin coming in from the Calabrese family. I know about the protection money you're collecting from businesses on Flatbush Avenue. I know where you keep your cash, where you hide your weapons, and where your mother lives in Queens." Deshaun stood up, his hand moving toward his gun. "Don't," Domenico said quietly. "Because if anything happens to me, all of this information goes to the FBI and also to the Calabrese family, who I'm sure would love to know that you've been skimming product from your shipments." The room went silent. "What do you want?" Deshaun asked finally. "Maya Crawford. You leave her alone. You tell everyone she's untouchable. And if I ever hear that you or any of your people came within 100 feet of her or her mother, all of this information gets released. Your operation ends. Your people go to prison, and you'll be lucky if the Calabrese family kills you quickly." Deshaun stared at him for a long moment. "Who the hell are you?" Domenico smiled, and for the first time in months, he felt like himself again. Not the broken man hiding in an abandoned villa, not the betrayed Don who'd lost everything, but the Godfather, who'd survived 30 years in the deadliest business in the world. "I'm someone you don't want to know. Do we have an understanding?" Deshaun nodded slowly. "Yeah, we have an understanding. The girl is untouchable." "Good. If I hear otherwise, you won't see me coming. You'll just wake up one morning and find your whole world on fire." Domenico walked out of the warehouse with his head high. The teenage guard stepped aside without a word, sensing that, whoever this man was, he was far more dangerous than he looked. When Domenico returned to the villa, Diane was waiting for him, pacing nervously. "It's done," he said simply. "Maya is safe. The Vipers won't touch her." Diane stared at him. "How? What did you do?" "What I do best. I made them understand that it was in their best interest to leave your family alone." She stepped closer, studying his face like she was seeing him for the first time. "Who are you really, Nico?" Domenico knew this moment was coming. He'd been dreading it and anticipating it in equal measure. "My real name is Domenico Russo," he said. "Until 3 months ago, I was the head of the Russo crime family. I was a godfather, Diane. I ran one of the most powerful mafia organizations in New York." He watched her face carefully, waiting for the fear, the disgust, the horror, but Diane just kept looking at him with those steady eyes. "And now?" she asked. "Now I'm nothing. I was betrayed by my nephew, stripped of everything I built. There's a contract on my life. I'm a dead man walking, just waiting for someone to collect. But you still helped my daughter. You saved my life when you had every reason not to. You showed me more loyalty in a few weeks than my own family showed in 15 years. How could I not help you?" Diane was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "What's your plan now? You can't hide here forever. I know Marco will eventually figure out where I am. When he does, he'll send soldiers to finish what he started. Then we need to get you somewhere safe." "We?" Domenico looked at her in surprise. Diane smiled, and it transformed her entire face. "You think I'm going to save your life just to let you die in some warehouse somewhere? No, we're going to figure this out, together." And that's when something shifted. Between them, it wasn't just gratitude anymore, or obligation, or even friendship. It was something deeper, something neither of them had expected. Over the next few weeks, as autumn turned to winter, Domenico and Diane became partners in survival. She used her nursing connections to get him clean identification papers. He used his remaining contacts to secure a safe apartment in a building where no one asked questions. They talked for hours, sharing stories of their lives. Diane told him about growing up in South Carolina, about moving to New York to escape an abusive husband, about building a life from nothing for her daughter. Domenico told her about Sicily, about his grandmother teaching him the old ways, about the weight of family legacy and the cost of power. "Do you regret it?" Diane asked one night. "The life you lived?" Domenico thought about it carefully. "I regret the violence. I regret the people I hurt who didn't deserve it, but I don't regret trying to protect my family, trying to build something that would last. Even though they betrayed you? Even though they betrayed me. Because for a while it was real. The brotherhood, the loyalty, the code for a while, it meant something." It was 3 days before Christmas when Diane came to the apartment with a strange expression on her face. "I need to tell you something," she said. "Something I should have told you a long time ago." Domenico felt a chill of premonition. "What is it?" Diane pulled out an old photograph from her wallet. It showed a man in a military uniform, handsome and proud, standing next to a younger version of Diane. "This is Marcus Crawford," she said quietly. "My late husband, he was a lieutenant in the army. He died 14 years ago." "I'm sorry for your loss," Domenico said, confused about where this was. He didn't die in combat," Diane continued, her voice steady but filled with old pain. "He was killed in New York. He was home on leave, and he was in the wrong place at the wrong time. He witnessed a murder outside a restaurant in Little Italy. The killers saw him watching and they gunned him down right there on the street." Domenico felt his stomach drop. "The police investigated," Diane said. "They determined it was a mob hit, the Russo crime family, but they could never prove it. Could never make any charges stick. The witnesses all disappeared or changed their stories. It became just another unsolved murder." She looked at Domenico with tears streaming down her face. "For 14 years, I've been trying to forgive the people who killed my husband, trying to let go of the anger and the hate because that's what Marcus would have wanted. He was a good man, Domenico. He believed in justice and honor and protecting the innocent." Domenico couldn't breathe. "When I found you in that villa, when I saw you dying, part of me wanted to walk away. Part of me thought, this is justice. This is karma for what your family took from me. But you didn't walk away. No, because I looked at you and I didn't see a godfather or a criminal. I saw a human being who was suffering, and I couldn't let you die, no matter what your family had done to mine." Domenico stood up, walked to the window, stared out at the city lights. "I don't remember ordering a hit in Little Italy 14 years ago, but I was the Don. Every death, every crime, every act of violence that happened under my watch was my responsibility." He turned back to face her. "Your husband died because of me, because of the world I built, the choices I made. How can you even stand to be in the same room with me?" Diane stood up and crossed the room to stand in front of him. "Because you're not that person anymore. The man I met in that villa, the man who protected my daughter, the man who sits here every night wrestling with his conscience. That's not the Godfather who built an empire on blood. It's the same man, Diane." "No," she said firmly. "It's a man who's been given a second chance, a man who's learned what really matters. The question is, what are you going to do with that chance?" Domenico looked at this incredible woman, this person who'd shown him mercy he didn't deserve, who'd chosen compassion over revenge, who'd saved his life, even knowing what he was. "I want to be better," he said quietly. "I want to build something that doesn't destroy people. I want to deserve the second chance you've given me." Diane took his hands in hers. "Then that's what we'll do, together." 6 months later, Domenico Russo sat in a small office in Brooklyn, reviewing financial statements. The sign on the door read, "Crawford Consulting, Small Business Services." He was using his decades of business experience, his understanding of complex financial systems, to help small business owners navigate the maze of permits, taxes, and regulations. He helped restaurants secure better supplier contracts, helped construction companies bid on legitimate contracts, helped immigrant entrepreneurs understand American business law. Everything he'd learned in the mafia, all that knowledge about how systems worked and how to navigate them, he was using it to help people instead of exploit them. Diane worked at the hospital 3 days a week and helped run the consulting business the other days. Her daughter Maya was thriving at her new school, had gotten a scholarship to Columbia University, and talked constantly about becoming a civil rights attorney. The Russo crime family still existed, still searched for Domenico. Marco had been arrested 6 months ago on RICO charges, but other members of the family had taken over. The contract on Domenico's life was still active. He knew that someday they might find him, that this peace he'd found might be shattered by violence from his past. But for now, he was building something real, something clean, something that honored the memory of men, like Marcus Crawford, instead of destroying them. One evening, as they were closing up the office, Diane turned to him and said, "I need to tell you something." Domenico looked up from the files he was organizing. "What is it?" "I love you," she said simply. "I know it's complicated. I know we have history that should make this impossible, but I love you, Domenico Russo. I love the man you've become, the man you're choosing to be every single day. Domenico crossed the small office and took her hands in his, just like he had that first day in the villa. I don't deserve you, he said. I don't deserve this second chance, this life, this happiness. Maybe not, Diane said with a small smile. But you're getting it anyway. That's called grace, Domenico. Unearned, undeserved forgiveness. It's the only thing that can break the cycle of violence and revenge. He kissed her then, in that small office in Brooklyn. Two broken people who'd found healing in the most unlikely place. I love you too, he whispered, and I promise you, for whatever time I have left, I will spend every day trying to be the man you see when you look at me. 5 years after that, Domenico Russo stood in a church in South Carolina, watching Diane's daughter Maya graduate from law school. She'd finished top of her class, had a job lined up at the Southern Poverty Law Center, and was engaged to a young man who taught high school history. Diane sat beside him, her hand in his. They'd never officially married because it was safer for her if they maintained some legal separation, but in every way that mattered, they were husband and wife. Marco Russo had died in prison 2 years ago, stabbed by a rival gang member. The new leadership of the Russo family had decided it wasn't worth the resources to keep hunting for Domenico. He was presumed dead by most of the underworld, just another body in the foundations of the city. But Domenico Russo was very much alive. He'd just learned how to truly live. After the graduation, Maya came over to them, her face glowing with pride and joy. Thank you, she said to Domenico, both of you for everything. You did this yourself, Domenico said. Your intelligence, your hard work, your dedication, but you gave me the chance to do it. Maya said, Mom told me everything about who you were, what you did to protect me, how you changed your life. You didn't have to do any of that. Yes, Domenico said quietly, I did, because your mother showed me that we always have a choice. Even when we think we're trapped, even when we think the past has written our future, we can choose to be better. Maya hugged him tight. I'm going to spend my career fighting for people who don't have power, who need someone to stand up for them. Because of what you two taught me, that's your legacy now, not violence, not the mafia. This. After she walked away to celebrate with her friends, Diane leaned her head on Domenico's shoulder. She's right, you know, Diane said. You built a different kind of empire, one based on helping people instead of hurting them. Domenico thought about his old life, about the power and fear and violence. He thought about his grandmother, who taught him that strength without compassion was just brutality. I was ruined, he said, lost everything I thought mattered, and it was the best thing that ever happened to me, because it meant I could rebuild myself into someone worth being. You were always worth being, Diane said. You just needed someone to believe in you long enough for you to believe in yourself. You saw something in me that night in the villa, something I couldn't see in myself. I saw a man who was suffering, who needed help. That's all it took for me to want to save you. Domenico pulled her close, looking out at the ceremony, at Maya celebrating with her classmates, at the life he never could have imagined when he was bleeding out in that abandoned villa. Thank you, he whispered, for seeing me, for saving me, for loving me. Thank you, Diane whispered back, for proving that people can change, that it's never too late for redemption, that grace really does transform everything it touches. They sat together in that church in South Carolina, the reformed Godfather and the woman who'd chosen mercy over revenge, watching the fruits of their second chance bloom into something beautiful. Sometimes ruin is just the breaking of what we think we need, so we can build what we actually need. Sometimes the person who saves you is the one you least expect. And sometimes the greatest empire you can build is one based on love instead of fear. Domenico Russo had been a godfather, a criminal, a man of violence and power, but in the end, he became something better. He became human. If this story moved you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear about second chances and redemption. Drop a comment and tell me, do you believe people can truly change? Can we escape the consequences of our past, or do they follow us forever? I'd love to hear your thoughts. This is a story about grace, about forgiveness, about choosing to be better, even when the world says it's too late. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. See you in the next story.